Hi, I'm Jake, co-founder of Made In, and today we are going to talk about both our French Western style culinary knives, our Eastern Japanese made culinary knives. Well, we've been selling knives for almost 6 years now, and we spent those last 6 years building a lot of credibility in our knife making. We obviously were going to be very protective over the manufacturing process and the partners we chose.
One of our initial theses of launching Made In was that we wanted a full core suite of products, from prep to plate, all underneath one brand that all embodied professional quality, used in the best restaurants. It was made in the best places in the world, and that would stand the test of time in your kitchen. So after cookware, we went straight into knives, and we went to one of the best places in the world, which was Thiers, France, for making knives.
When we design knives, we think about what is going to be most appealing to, our home cooks and professional chefs alike. Every great chef has a variety of knives in their role, and each one serves a different purpose. Some they use more than others, but really it's carefully curated. And that's how we looked at this assortment, right? When we think about what shapes are most renowned in the Western world, in France and Germany, and these knife-making kind of capitals, it's a really classic, robust chef knife that's incredibly multi-purpose. It's a paring knife that's really refined and great for uses with smaller ingredients. And even a bread knife, right? That has, a designed serrated blade that's great for cutting through breads and things like tomatoes. So these are the shapes that really these parts of the world are known for and should be in part of that Western collection. When we are looking at making amazing knives in Seki, Japan, we're looking at shapes that are really Eastern style knives and what chefs use day in and day out that are more classic shapes. It's a gyuto, a nikiri knife, or a santoku. And these are knives that have really distinct purposes as well that we felt like were crucial for our assortment.
Part of the fun part about launching a brand was getting to design these products from the ground up. And that meant reimagining and rethinking what we loved about knives and what would make the best knife possible for both the professional and home cook. What we really cared about were multiple things, one of which was balance, one of which was the bolster, and one of which was the sharpness and cutting abilities of the knives. We felt like those were kind of the three main aspects of what makes a knife really great. It wasn't like in our eyes, there was someone doing it perfect. There was great parts about what the Japanese knife makers were doing, and there were great parts about what the German and French knife makers were doing. And for us, it felt weird to have to choose between being completely a Western-made knife or an Eastern-made knife.
When we launched our first Western-style knives, we made them in France with a very common German-French premium knife material. It's X50 CR MOV 15, blend of a lot of different metals and elements that make a very durable stainless steel knife that can also get very sharp. As we moved to an Eastern style knife, which you see we're releasing now, we went with a little more classic material that's very common in Eastern style knives. It's a VG10 metal, and it's higher in carbon content. So as a result, it's a harder metal that can get sharper and stay sharper, but it's also a little more brittle, so you have to be a little bit more careful with it and care for it more. Damascus is really the art and manufacturing process of folding different metals atop each other, and as a result, you get kind of this wavy tiger stripe-like effect on the metal itself, which is a nice differentiation from kind of our classic stainless steel, Western style knife.
On our chef knife, we designed this bolster from scratch. A bolster is the connection of the blade into the handle. For Western knives, you tend to see a bolster that goes all the way from the spine, and on Eastern knives, you tend to not see a bolster at all. We thought this was the perfect hybrid between the two. In a Western-made knife, so you see it in Germany and France, you tend to see these giant bolsters. What that ends up doing is it creates a really heavy knife. Some people like that because it gives you a hard chopping feeling when we're going down. It gives you a little bit more weight, but it also adds a lot of fatigue to your wrist. Whereas Japanese knives are almost the opposite. They're very delicate, a lot of precision in those knives. And so when we were creating the bolster, we thought a hybrid blend between the two would be optimal. The reason being, one, we wanted to cut down on the weight of the knife overall, so it would be applicable to more home cooks and more people would find it comfortable. But also for sharpening reasons. When you have a Western blade that has a full bolster all the way down to the blade, it actually can't sharpen well over time because the bolster is a different thickness. You don't get the same evenness across the blade, and you start to get this wavy aspect. So we wanted to get rid of that, and that's why we have a naked heel here on ours. This creates the ability to keep the exact blade angle and blade curvature the exact same for years and years and years, so this knife stays sharp and stays the same shape for the rest of its time. The angled bolster hadn't existed in Europe before us. It was really important for us to develop something that we believed was the best bolster for our chef knives. It was really important for us to get this into our knives. And so we worked for almost a year with our French manufacturers to develop the tooling to get from a straight bolster to an angled bolster. Kind of seems silly because it seems like could be easy, but it had never been done before, and they had to adapt tooling, build new tooling. And it took about a year for us to get from concept to reality, and to get us to a knife that we believe is best in class in maneuverability, in ergonomics, and in weight and distribution.
With a Western style knife, especially a chef's knife, you tend to have a double bevel blade. That's great for any type of cut you need. It's great for righties and lefties. You don't really have to think about how you're chopping. On Eastern style knife making, a lot of times you'll see a single bevel, so there's only an angle on one side of the blade. But the cutting motion usually is one long motion, and you can't kind of rock or chop like you would on a Western style knife. We thought for ability to use this for a lot of different cooking functions and prep functions, both of our blades, Western and Eastern, have a double bevel. So it's a little bit of a departure than the most classic of Eastern knives, but we think it's more practical for everyday prep and still takes a lot of the cues from what makes Eastern knives great.
The other thing we were super excited about custom designing on our French chef knives was the handle. Traditionally, when you're looking at Western knives, you see these boxy, angular handles. And we believe that actually was the wrong design because it creates blisters when you use it over time. You have these angular shapes, and during a pinch grip or a normal grip, you start to get that angle rubbing against your fingers and creating calluses over time. No tooling existed for this before. We were insistent on having a more circular or round edge across the entire knife because that's a much nicer hand feel and much more control using a round knife.
Handle material is a high polymer POM handle. It's essentially a plastic handle that is going to be super durable, antimicrobial, isn't going to wear or break over time. It's going to also just look great and clean on your countertop. When you're curating at home, one thing we really wanted to do was make sure that the designs of the knives had some streamlined aesthetics and functionality. So you can mix and match between knives we might make in France and knives we might make in Japan, and you'll see that with the handle shapes, styles. But really, you want to look for knives that'll complement the type of cooking you're doing at home. If you're doing a lot of vegetable prep and you love to spend, a lot of time chopping carrots and brunoise and cubing vegetables, a Nikiri knife is the best thing you can get. It's a lot of up and down chopping, but it's a really distinct use around vegetable prep. If you want a more, multi-purpose knife that you can beat up and cut through bones with and prep any type of vegetables, maybe it's a Western style chef knife with a thicker spine. We also have a Gyuto, which is a little bit more of a refined, sharper chef knife that you can still use multi-purpose, but really is kind of the Eastern expression of what a chef knife should be.
When you're a young business, investing in anything custom is really scary. It's a huge investment, so we had to believe we could sell a lot of knives to make that custom design worth it. But for us, we wanted to come out with the best knife possible. We wanted one that hadn't existed on the market before, and it ended up producing a knife that we absolutely love.